Let's get ready. Good morning and welcome to the March 4th Social Equity Working Group meeting. Before we begin the meeting, I'd like to ask Evelia Castellanos, who's serving as our clerk today, to confirm if we have a quorum.
Yes, Chair Moreno, we have a quorum.
Wonderful, thank you. I'd also like to review the process for both the working group members as well as members of the public who wish to speak under public comment. For working group members, when you'd like to speak, please click on the raised hand icon in the Zoom control panel. You have control of your video and mute, so please turn on your camera when you'd like to speak and I could call on you. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, seeing none. Jane, would you mind providing a quick reminder on how the public comment will work?
Yes. So as noted on the cover page of today's meeting agenda, in addition to emailed comments, the public also may provide live comments during today's meeting. To provide a live verbal comment during the meeting, please join the Zoom meeting either by computer or phone. At the time of public comments, members of the public are advised to, quote, raise the hand if you wish to provide comments. The raised hand feature can be found on the Zoom toolbar for those of you who are joining via computer, and by entering *9 for those joining via telephone only. The chair will call on members of the public by name for those joining via computer and by the last 3 digits of your telephone number for those joining via telephone. All comments received prior to the close of the meeting will be made part of the meeting record. The instructions for providing live comments also are on the bottom of the cover page of today's meeting agenda, which can be accessed from the homepage of SANDAG's website at www.sandag.org. And also just to remind everyone that the chat function in the in Zoom is not considered public comment. So keep the comments that you make in there declarations for if you aren't hearing something or a technical issue, but not for public comment. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And we're going to move on to item number 1, which is welcome and introductions. I'd like to take this opportunity for our working group members to introduce themselves and the area of the region they serve, so the public joining us today are aware. And I'm going to allow you guys to just start saying hello on your own, okay?
Good morning. This is Craig Jones with the Alliance for Regional Solutions, a collaborative of North County, generally north of Highway 56. Thank you. Good morning.
Hi, I'm Monica Hernandez from Casa Familiar. I'm their Development and Social Impact Director from the South Bay.
Barry Pollard with the Urban Collaborative Project in Southeast San Diego.
Good morning, Rosa Biles with Bayside Community Center in Linda Vista.
Good morning, I'm Carol Lewis with El Cajon Collaborative and represent East County.
Hi, I'm Konani Martinez with the National Latino Research Center at Cal State San Marcos, representing North County region.
Good morning, my name is Claire Grubner. I'm with Olivewood Gardens and Learning Center representing National City.
Good morning, I'm Erica Leary with the Vista Community Clinic working in Oceanside and Vista.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Hernandez. I'm with City Heights Community Development Corporation. We serve the Mid-City, City Heights area.
And Chula Vista Community Collaborative.
Azucena Lopez de Nava, Chula Vista Community Collaborative, serving South Bay area.
And Samahan.
Morning, everyone. Lorna De Los Santos, representing Samahan Health Center in South Bay.
Okay, that's everybody.
Oh, this is Brianne with Nile Sisters Development Initiative. We're located in City Heights and we serve across San Diego County.
Great.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Did Caro go with EHC? I don't.
I think she is on, and she said she was on another call.
Okay.
I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
Sorry, it's the multitasking fault. But this is Caro with Environmental Health Coalition, and we are located in National City. Happy to be here.
Thank you.
But hold on, but we're representing Barrio Logan here. I'm just trying to.
That's good. We're
Okay.
happy to have you here.
Yes, happy to be here.
Did anybody else speak now? All right. So I don't see any comments from the public. If the clerk can just verify that. Okay.
Yes, Chair Moreno, there are no public comments.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next item, which is the approval of the minutes from our February 4th, 2021. May I have a motion to approve the February 4th minutes?
I'll make a motion. This is Barry from the Urban Collaborative Project.
Okay, I got a motion by Mr. Pollard. Can I have a second?
This is Craig Jones. I will second. And after adoption, I've got just a quick question about the minutes.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll call on the clerk for the roll call. Ms. Castellanos, take it away.
Alliance for Regional Solutions, Craig Jones.
Aye.
Bayside Community Clinic,
Yes.
Rose Cabez. Casa Familiar, Luz Cuestas.
It's actually Monica Hernandez representing Casa Familiar, and I.
Thank you. El Cajon Collaborative, Carol Lewis.
Yes, aye.
National Latino Research Center, Conan Martinez.
This is Konana, yes.
City Heights, Stephanie
Yes.
Hernandez.
Aye.
Chula Vista Community Collaborative, Azucena Lopez de Nava.
Yes, hi.
Samhana Health Centers,
Lorna De La Santos.
Silkman. Lorna de los Santos. Urban Collaborative Project,
This is Barry. Aye.
Pollard.
Aye. Aye.
Vista Community Clinic, Erica Leary.
Sorry, did you hear me? I said aye.
El Cajon Collaborative, Carol Lewis.
You already called on me, but yes.
City Heights CDC. I called on you, my apologies. Nile Sisters Development Initiative,
Aye.
Olive Gardens,
Yes.
Mayor Grubner.
Yes.
Alliance for Regional Solutions, Craig Jones.
Yes, I voted aye.
Bayside Community Clinic, Rosa Ceballos.
I also voted aye.
And And the motion passes with those present.
Wonderful, thank you for that. Working group members, if you'd like to offer a comment, please either raise your hand or turn on your camera. And I'm going to call on Mr. Jones. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a real quick, I appreciate the minutes and especially capturing when actions are taken. This is a question for Sandag staff. We had significant discussion with our last meeting on the social equity analysis, which I didn't see reflected in the minutes. And is it possible just to kind of get a sense of when there's extensive discussion on an item?
So the way that we do meeting minutes, because we are videotaping, and before we, when we were using the audio recordings, where that you could go back to the meeting and you could listen to it yourself. We shifted to a long time ago to what we call action minutes, which are basically just if there's an action, then we have the vote and what the vote was for, but not we don't try to interpret the discussion. Let that you know, be in the recording.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Any other panelists have any comments? I don't see any. I don't see anybody in the public with their hand raised. So we are going to move on to the next item, which is member or public comment. So members of the public are going to have an opportunity to address the working group on any issues within the jurisdiction of Sandag that is not on the agenda. I don't see any public comments. I don't see anybody with their hands raised. Can you just verify that, clerk?
Yeah, there are no public comments, Chair Moreno.
Thank you. And so if working group members have any comments or announcements of interest to the rest of the working group, please either turn on your camera or raise your hand at this time. I don't see any working group members with their hands raised or a camera on, so we are going to move on to the next item, which is the chair's report. So early in February, Planning Director Colleen Clemenson presented how we're going to transform the vision into the 2021 regional plan for a faster, fair, and cleaner transportation system across the region. I also heard an excellent presentation from Sandag's Office of Diversity and Equity regarding best practices in supporting disadvantaged businesses. You could find the recording on the Sandag Region YouTube channel for the February 26th board meeting. I find that now that Sandag is, I think, recording all of its board, committee, and working group meetings, it's possible to listen to key reports and stay up to date on issues that are important to you. Last week, Sandag's Executive Director Hassan Ikrata testified at the California Strategic Growth Council meeting and expressed support for updates to the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Grant Program draft guidelines, which could include a distribution goal for each geographic area. And essentially, this is going to mean that at least one project in the San Diego geographic area is going to be awarded in the next grant cycle. And finally, the Midcoast Trolley project, which is scheduled to open later this year, has had some major milestones, including the lighting of Gilman Bridge, completion of construction on Friars Road, portion of which has been closed since 2016 as part of the Midcoast Trolley, and the San Diego River Double Track project. So really great stuff coming out of Sandag. And if at this point, if any working group members would like to make any comments or have any questions about the chair's report, please either turn on your camera or raise your hand. I'll give you guys a few seconds here, or a few seconds. I don't see anybody with their hands raised. I also don't see anybody in the public with their hands raised, so I'm going to move on to the next item. This is item number 5. It's a continuation of last month's discussion on the new regional fare collection system and possible amendment to transit fare in 2021. Working group members were interested in making a recommendation to the MTS board, and we had an issue with the item being on the agenda as discussed. So before we get an update from Brian Lane, I would like to ask Samantha Folk from Sandag's General Counsel for some clarifying remarks. Ms. Folk, if you don't mind taking it away.
Good morning, Madam Chair. This is John Kirk, General Counsel of Sandag, and I apologize that Samantha was unavailable this morning, but she briefed me on this. And I understand the question to be the propriety of this group offering feedback on the potential for fare modification. First of all, I'd say this group does not provide input necessarily to MTS. You're not an MTS body, but ultimately your line of reporting does go to the Sandag board, and the Sandag board, they delegate responsibility for review of fare changes to the Transportation Committee, but ultimately all of those decisions are subject to ratification by the board. So based upon your charter includes the responsibility to review and provide input that will be used to develop and adopt both the 2019 federal RTP and the upcoming 2021 regional plan. One of the chapters in the regional plan, at least looking at our most recent regional plan, and that will likely be in this one too, obviously, is going to be social equity. That was chapter 4 in the last regional plan. And in the discussion there, specifically, one of the areas of discussion was titled affordability of transit fares. So looking at your charter coupled with the scope of the regional plan, it might be my opinion that it would be proper for this body to offer input on the affordability of transit fares and any input on the consideration of modification of those chairs. Any input that you provide should be considered by the Transportation Committee or the Board of Directors as ultimately they make decisions on those points. And I do believe that it's properly noticed today for you to provide any input on that should you desire.
Wonderful, thank you for that. And I'm just for the sake of my, me understanding what you just said, digesting what you said, we as a body, as the working group, are not allowed per our guidelines to make recommendations to outside agencies or opine. We, though, can make recommendations to either the Transportation Committee that's going to take up this issue, the fare policy, or directly to the board. Is that correct? Did I understand that right?
Generally, that's right. Although your line of reporting in your charter says that you report specifically to the Regional Planning Committee, because the subject of your jurisdiction is to provide input on the regional plan and a component of the regional plan has to do with fares, then you can make a recommendation or provide feedback. Now that feedback can be provided to outside groups. It just shouldn't be, you're not providing a recommendation to them. It would be proper though at that to say that Sandag has a group on this that is charged with providing feedback, and this was their opinion. It's not that your decision is necessarily binding at all on MTS, but it could be considered by them.
Okay, did everybody get that? All right, and if you guys do have any questions, you could ask them at the end once this presentation is completed. So Brian Lane is going to explain the fare policy setting process and update us on the status. So Mr. Lane, take it away.
Good morning and thank you. Yeah, I was gonna pare down my presentation from last time. I think you all were able to see that. If you do have questions about Pronto, I can go back. I have a bunch of slides hidden in this PowerPoint, so we can go back if you need to, but I think you all heard it probably at the last CBO meeting. So yeah, like John kind of mentioned, the Sandag Transportation Committee does have the delegation from the board to make changes to the regional fare ordinance. MTS and NCTD's boards obviously have their own fare enforcement ordinances, and we'll vote on those in the coming weeks. Actually, what they'll be doing in the coming weeks is proposing their recommendation to the Sandag Transportation Committee. Once the Sandag Transportation Committee approves the fare changes, then their boards would do a quick update to their fare enforcement, what do you call them, policies, to just include the fare changes. So it's kind of a weird and clunky, as Sharon put it at MTS's meeting this morning, but it does end up working. But essentially, MTS and entity will forward some recommendations from their boards over the coming weeks. Sandag Transportation Committee will hear it in April 2nd and April 16th. And then the changes would be implemented in May, likely. So I think you all saw the scenarios that we presented last month. There were 3 scenarios. The 2 first ones were the ones that were on the original take ones and messaging. And the third one was added as a reaction to a lot of public feedback that we were getting. And that was, do not do any fare increases. Just implement the best fare capabilities and reduce the youth one-way regional fares. MTS's executive committee again took this item this morning to propose a recommendation to the MTS board for their meeting and their consideration next Thursday. Included in that proposal this morning at MTS executive committee was the addition of a free transfer type fare. And this was in response to a letter from Circulate San Diego that asked MTS and Sandag and NCTD to start considering this free transfer. And essentially what it is as well as adding the new best fare capabilities, adding in a free transfer or maybe like a free 2-hour type ticket. So MTS's board, or executive committee, excuse me, heard that this morning and did like what they were hearing and are proposing to their board that that be the proposal. So it's essentially, at this point, what MTS is going to take next Thursday is scenario 3, no increases, just introduce the best fare capabilities, reduce the youth one-way fares, and add the free 2-hour ride. So that works in perfectly with the new Pronto system. So what happens is, and this really is only for riders who don't ride enough in a month to get the $72 monthly pass or the $23 STM and youth pass. But essentially, a rider would, they'd have some money on their Pronto card or on the mobile app. They would tap their first ride and they would get 2 hours for free. That could be on the same route coming back within that 2 hours or transferring to the trolley or another bus, whichever. And it wouldn't include Coaster. Trying to add in Coaster to all this mix would be too hard anyways. And Coaster's not going to be part of the best fare capping anyways, but you could transfer Sprinter, Breeze, MTS buses. And so you'd get that free 2 hours. And so if you had a ride from a bus to a trolley, let's say within 2 hours, your card would only be charged $2.50. And then if you go home later that day and have to do the same thing, you would just be charged $2.50. And now you're up to $5. So, what they were proposing to do is that rider would, in the original scenario 3 proposal, that rider would pay $2.50 for each of their one-way trips. And they would cap out at $6 for that day on their third trip. What this does essentially is for those riders, they would only cap at $5 for that day. They would only move up to the day cap of $6 if they actually had to take a third one-way trip in a day. So let's say during lunch, you had to go somewhere else, or you had to go drop the kids at school or something else. Then you would actually hit that $6 cap. So for some people, they may be hitting $6. Some people may be hitting $5. Again, the Pronto system's smart enough to recognize all that. And then for the month, people who ride enough in a month, they would likely hit their monthly pass price cap at some point. So if you're doing $5 a day, it would just take you another day or so to get up to that $72 monthly cap instead of the $6 a day type thing. So and the fare consultant, the modeling consultant who looks at all these numbers and tries to estimate how much revenues and ridership changes would happen from this change, tried to look at all this and told MTS and us that it really probably wouldn't have too much of a revenue hit because so many of the riders in the region do ride enough that they still likely hit that $72 cap. So what this does help is those who are very infrequent riders who don't ride enough in a day or in a month to get the better caps. I hope all that kind of makes sense. It's all very new. That wasn't presented at MTS's boards or entities boards in the past. This was just today. They'll hear more about that at their board, obviously next Thursday. But again, that was the recommendation from MTS's executive committee. So, you know, like I said, my next slide, I think it's, this is the next, the timeline for the next few meetings. MTS's board will meet next Thursday. NCTD's board will meet the Thursday after that. Again, they'll be making recommendations to Sandak Transportation Committee. We're all hoping that they're the same recommendations, and NCTD's staff and board are working to align themselves with MTS's new changes this morning. And then Sandak Transportation Committee will hear that at their April 2nd and 16th meeting. And then the new changes could start no earlier than 30 days after that second Transportation Committee meeting, sometime in April. MTS's board executive committee did hear this morning that these new fare free transfer window or new fare would cause a slight delay in the pronto implementation because they have to incorporate these new business rules into the system and are working with the vendor on getting that. So it delayed a little bit. So it may not be middle of April that pronto starts being piloted to frequent users. It may be a little bit later in April, but at least they have the ability to start it as soon as April 16th if the Transportation Committee approves it in at their Friday, April 16th meeting. So with that, I went through things kind of quickly, and I'll hand it back to you, Chair.
Thank you. So I see Mr. Jones with his hand raised. So go ahead and take the floor, Mr. Jones.
Thank you. You know, from the presentation, it sounds like things are moving in the right direction. I recall our group discussion last month favoring scenario 3. I'll let somebody make a motion to that effect, but a couple of follow-up questions for Brian. How was the 2-hour limitation on the fare transfer, free fare transfer? Why 2 hours? How was that arrived at? And did I hear you say that the coaster is not included in that exchange? And why would that be again?
So I'll start with the coaster question. Coasters is so complicated with their zones that they weren't going to be part of the fare capping part anyways. So they offer a day pass and they offer a a monthly pass. And a lot of their riders are commuters. So that was kind of their thinking. It's too complicated to work in the best fare capabilities. You do get that if you ride the coaster enough and you have a day pass, you're able to ride all the other transit services in the region. Same as if you have a coaster monthly pass, you're able to ride all the other services in the region. If you ride, then the system will be smart enough. If you generally ride the trolley and the bus, maybe in San Diego most of the month, and you go take a coaster trip maybe once or a couple times a month, the system will be smart enough to calculate some of that money you spent on the coaster into your capping for the month, into your MTS regional monthly pass price. You won't get the full value. If you ride the coaster at its $6 one-way trip, you would get the similar value of what a MTS bus or trolley would. So that's kind of the thinking on that. And coaster, if someday coaster does move away from zones, maybe it then would be easier to incorporate into the best fare capabilities. But at this point, they're not wanting to go there. And then the 2-hour window was the circulated, thrown out a couple scenarios. So MTS and the consultant did a big dive and did a peer analysis of a lot of other agencies to see what they're doing with similar type free transfers or 2-3 hour windows. There were a couple that had a 3-hour window. There were a couple that had a 90-minute free ride type system. Most had a 2-hour system, and I think they felt that gave enough time for riders to make a transfer and get to their final destination.
And that's 2 hours from the start of the initial trip, right? Okay, so within that 2 hours.
Yeah, the start of their first trip and then the start of their second trip, essentially. So, if the end of their second trip is more than 2 hours, that the system doesn't care.
Okay, good, good, good. Just refresh my memory quickly. Who operates Coaster?
NCTV.
It would be nice in the future if everything could be integrated.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
telling me. It's just hard. Coaster is a very premium service, and it's so long and it's expensive to run that they do charge those higher prices for that longest trip. And they try to keep the price more competitive for the shorter trips. If they charge that higher price, the highest, longest trip price for the shorter trips, they probably wouldn't get many riders on the short trips.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for your comments. Let's move on to Erica Leary.
There we go. I made this comment last time, and I don't know if my colleagues concur or not, but I just wanted it on the record that I think we should be exploring free transit. It's a movement across the world and many other cities, and it may not be possible right now, but as we develop the regional plan and a bold new vision, I think being bold and pushing for free transit in our region should at least be explored and acknowledged, if not implemented immediately. That's
Thank you, Ms. Leary. We're going to move on to Rosina Lizárraga.
Thank you, Chair Moreno. My question is, I always inquire myself about the affordability of a transportation, and that's something that is questioned among our constituents. There's a big, tremendous difference between what is affordable for seniors and for students and for or type of population versus the adult fare. And we've been advocating for affordability also for adults. And that back up what a little bit what Erica was saying. It's a humongous difference on that. And how is determined that $75 or $74 a monthly pass is determined? I'm concerned about the affordability too with this economy. So for any adult that they can use as fare for transportation, then the adults usually use it for back and forth. And I just don't understand how it's determined versus the other fares cost.
Yeah, I guess that's a complicated question. The past prices and one-way fares and all that have historically been the highest is for adults, and then discounts. There is a law, federal law, that discounts must be given to seniors and those with disabilities, and it has to be half price. The law is just for one-way fares during the peak hours, but that's hard to enforce. So MTS and NTD with Sandag and with help with Transnet sales tax dollars actually give them that discount for their monthly pass prices and now the day pass prices, as well as the one-day pass prices. So currently, that's kind of how all the fares are structured, for the adult being the main fare, and then the seniors and youth, senior disabled and youth being that essentially it's well more than half off now. It's 67%, I believe, off of the pass price for the monthly pass. So that the one ways and day passes are about half off. Just to go back to Erica's comment and it's also your comment, I don't want to spoil too much for what you're going to hear next Friday at the Sandag board meeting, but we're going to start getting into the weeds and discussions of, for the regional plan, some of the policies and revenues and pricing structures. And low income fares is something that we are starting to look at in the regional plan. And with new revenue sources that we could hopefully get, that would be something that would be incorporated much sooner than later in the plan. So the big part of all that is that, the agencies currently only have so much dollars that they receive from federal, state, and local sales tax dollars. Fares make up right now for MTS and NTD about a third of their revenue. So it is a significant portion. And so making any major changes to those does require other revenue sources or funding sources from somewhere else, or changing where funding sources come from. So with the regional plan, we are identifying either low income, youth, senior, continuing those discounts for those who need it.
All right, thank you so much.
Wonderful, thank you. So I don't see anybody's hands up. I don't see anybody's camera on there. Oh, here we go.
Excuse me, Chair Moreno. We do have an attendee with the hand raised, Noah Harris.
Yes, Miss Avelia, but I was speaking to the panelists first.
Oh, I'm
Before we
sorry.
go on. No, yeah, before we go on to the public, I see Mr. Harris in his hand up, but I did get Randy. Go ahead and take the floor.
Thank you, Chair Moreno, and thanks to staff for returning with this item here. I know that this is transit affordability and transportation affordability in general is something that is a great priority to our working group and our organizations, and continues to be a theme ever since I joined this working group. And I'm excited to hear that next Friday that the staff is going to be looking at as part of the regional plan more free transit options for low-income riders and free transit in general. So that's exciting to know. And thanks again for bringing this back. I think scenario 3 is a scenario that would reduce one-way fares for youth. I think that I appreciate that this has been added. I did follow the MTS executive committee meeting this morning. It did make things a little bit more interesting because now there's a one free transfer option on the table, but it calls for a fare increase in 2025. So what was approved by the board this morning at MTS was for the board to be able to revisit that in the future. So hopefully we can maybe with the future funding measure as part of the regional plan address that. Right. So, but given all that, and given that the scenario 3 is still on the option here, and that NCTD has not yet supported what was proposed today at MTS, that I'd like to make a motion based on our comments last time to support scenario 3, which is to reduce youth one-way regional fares as part of the Pronto rollout.
Wonderful. I see. Did that conclude your comments, Randy? Thank you.
Yes.
I see Caro. Go ahead and take the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very exciting, and we support Randy's recommendation. It's very exciting to see how the topic has evolved, that we are centering the needs of our communities, especially during the pandemic, that we have all come to a place where we understand that our communities do not have the capacity to increase more expense, to increase their expenses, especially when it comes to mass public transit. So we support the motion, and we are excited to see how the whole region is moving towards the other recommendation that ultimately is where we need to get, that transit needs to be free, because we cannot afford to continue to drive single occupancy vehicles ultimately. So we're excited and we're in support. Thank you.
So if I may, Chair, and Randy, I don't know if you were you including, wanting to include in that motion that also the free transfer opportunity that they've recently added? Because scenario 3 currently on my slides, don't say that, but that is what MTS considered today. And like you said, their executive committee forwarded to the board. But the newest part of this, all that it's moving really fast, is that free transfer, the 2-hour free ride.
Yeah, we're supportive of the free transfer, but are concerned about the fare increase, and that's as part of that in 2025. So,
yeah, I'm not honestly not sure how that would be incorporated into a fare ordinance. I can't even imagine how I would write. We include all this, and then 3 years from now, 4 years from now, we're going to do something. I think there was a little bit of hesitation at MTS's executive committee on how exactly that would be worded. I think it would be good to include in your recommendation that anything like that should just not be looked at today, and should be you should wait. MTS should wait to look at that in a couple of years once CARES funding is starting to run out and the fiscal realities of everything is starting to be more apparent at that time. but to talk about it now, to me, seems awkward.
Okay, so the in your mind, the as part of the regional fare ordinance, that the fare increase in 2025 is not built in to the regional fare ordinance. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just not sure how. I mean, we've never done that with the ordinance. Had, you know, here's what we're doing today, or, you know, for the next 6 months to the next, from the next 6 months through 3 years from now, and then in 3 years this. I just, to me, so many things can change, including, you know, ballot measures or anything else that would change that. And I'm just not sure why it's worth amending the ordinance to include something for 3 years from now. Why not just wait? If that wants to be a direction that, you know, boards are telling staff to don't forget to look at maybe increasing something, that's fine. But I'm just not sure how I would incorporate that into. I haven't spoken with our legal staff or others, but it's just awkward to me, including.
Brian, sorry to interrupt, but one of the things you could probably do, Randy, and it is your motion, is maybe suggest that at this time, you know, this body is not recommending a fare increase. You know, just speak in the affirmative, not in the future, right now. And that would be my suggestion. You do have a motion on the floor. You don't have a second though. But the one other clarifying factor that I wanted to add was, would you like this letter to be sent to Transportation Committee or to the SANDAG board? You didn't give direction on the motion where you would like this letter to be sent. So just.
Yeah, no, thanks for that insight. Yeah, great advice. Yeah, I think, you know, after hearing more info from Brian and the chair's recommendation, I'd motion that we, that the social equity working group here support scenario 3, including the free transfer, and that we do not support any fare increase for transit riders, and that recommendation be taken to the Transportation Committee and the board and the Regional Planning Committee, all the relevant SANDAG decision-making authorities.
Okay, and so we have a motion on the floor. I'm going to move on to, based on how I saw people raise their hand, and I have Mr. Craig Jones. Please take it away.
Oops. With those clarifications, I'll second the motion. Once we've done with this motion and voted on it, I've got just another follow-on question.
Wonderful, thank you. So we have a motion, a second on the floor by Mr. Jones. I see Miss Erica Leary with her hand up.
Sorry, geez, my mouse. I can't. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So I would support that, but just a follow-up question to Randy, if he would consider my previous statement to include as part of the recommendations that for long-term planning, any appropriate body also examines the feasibility of free public transit moving forward for our region.
Yeah, I'd be willing to amend the motion to include that that we recommend that the agency use best efforts to make transit free, to develop a free transit program as part of the 5 big moves.
Okay, so we have a modification to the motion. Does the seconder accept the modifications?
Yes, that was going to be the nature of my follow-on comment. So it's now included in the motion. So yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Anything else to add, Erica?
No, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So I do see you out there, Mr. Noah Harris, but just to reinstate, the motion is scenario 3 with the addition of not supporting fare increase and with the addition of best efforts to develop a free transit program. And that letter is going to be sent to Transportation Committee, the SANDAG board, and the planning, I don't know what the formal title is, but the planning group committee. And so I see Erica, your hand is up, but I think it's just, you forgot to put it down. We are going to move on to public comment unless anybody else on the committee has comments, questions on the motion? I don't see any, so we are going to move on to Mr. Noah Harris. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. And then there's also, oh yeah, we got it, the scenarios. Okay, Mr. Harris, if you could hear us, we cannot hear you. If you would like to unmute. Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Absolutely, go for it.
Thanks, sorry for the delay there. Hey all, this is Noah with Climate Action Campaign. Just wanted to call in briefly and join our partner organizations in urging our transportation agencies to adopt scenario 3 per the MTS Executive Committee meeting this morning and the motion today to halt any fare increases and reduce the cost of youth fares, all while avoiding any service reductions, especially during this pandemic and economic recession, which is disproportionately impacting low-income transit-dependent riders. And thanks so much. This is exciting. Thanks for the discussion today.
Wonderful. Okay, so I don't see anybody else in the public with their hand raised. Clerk, if you could just verify that, please.
There are no hands raised in the public, Chair Moreno.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So we have a motion by Randy and a second by Mr. Jones. And I'll call the clerk for the roll call vote, please. Clerk.
Alliance for Regional Solutions,
Aye.
Bayside Community Clinic,
Aye.
Casa Familiar,
Aye.
City Heights, CDC.
We support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Chula Vista Community Collaborative.
Aye.
Yes. El Cajon Collaborative, Carol Lewis.
Yes.
National Latino Research Center, Conan Martinez.
Yes.
Nile Sisters Development Initiative, Brianne Losh.
Aye.
Olive Gardens, Claire Grubner.
Yes.
Nile Sisters Development Initiative,
I had said aye.
Samantha Health Centers, Lorna de los Santos. I can't hear you. Vista Community Clinic.
Aye.
And the motion passes with those present.
Wonderful. Thank you, clerk, for that. So we are going to move on to the next item, which is item number 6. It's on the social equity nomenclature of the upcoming draft of the 2021 regional plan. Jane will be facilitating this item. Please take it away.
All right. Yes. Hello. We have been discussing as we're thinking through discussing the issues of communities of concern. This is a term that we've used in the past. when we're thinking about the communities, disadvantaged communities that we are working with, and in the process of analyzing the network. And so this has come up a couple of times in a variety of circumstances as we're doing outreach for the CMCPs, the Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Studies, as we're thinking through the social equity analysis for the regional plan, and in various reports and documents that we have. So at the outreach team meeting a couple of weeks ago, we talked about this. We've also had several communications with various organizations, including just more recently a letter from the Human Relations Commission from the City of San Diego, concerned about the term of communities of concern. And this kind of opens up a whole conversation about the words that we use and how we integrate different words into discussions that we have in our analysis. So wanted to basically just facilitate a conversation about how we think about different groups and how we reference groups and communities, and what terms, how everybody feels in terms of the terminology that's used in the nomenclature for different communities. And so wanted to kind of facilitate a conversation with all of you about what you think about different terms and groupings of people versus communities, and what your thoughts are. First of to whether communities of concern. So communities of concern has been used for metropolitan planning organizations and a number of public agencies in two ways. One, the way we originally had used communities of concern was to group the disadvantaged populations that we were analyzing in the performance measures. That has kind of gone away for quite some time. But there are, we also are thinking about communities, and there are, again, disadvantaged communities, communities that are have been marginalized and historically marginalized, disenfranchised. And again, then the issue of even the term communities. So are we talking about geographic communities versus neighborhoods versus populations? And so we wanted to just have a conversation about that and your kind of feelings about different terminology and preferences, and to end up at the end of the day with a number of different sort of a vocabulary of terms that we feel comfortable with, so that in our workings that we have a glossary of terms that we can use when we're talking about communities of color, disadvantaged communities, vulnerable communities, and all those words have impact, and they don't necessarily have the same impact on everyone. So we wanted to just have a conversation and facilitate a conversation about that and brainstorming.
Wonderful. Jane, does that conclude your presentation? Okay. And before we go into our panelist, I did note that in the chat, Mr. Pollard wasn't able to vote on the last motion. So we're going to take that up, Mr. Pollard, once this item is completed, but I saw your note, and we will take it up. So continuing with this item, Caro? Caro with EHC, you have the floor.
Thank you. I think this is an excellent conversation. I could share the way we refer to ourselves in the environmental justice movement. It's a really important way of how do we see ourselves. We use the term environmental justice communities because that's where we want to move towards. We want to move towards justice. We strongly believe that it's a lot more dignified to our communities. I'm not suggesting that we use environmental justice communities. I'm just giving you the thought process that we use for our communities to inform the process. We want to move away from being underserved, marginalized, under-resourced. And that's the idea, right? That we're investing and centering justice and centering dignity for our communities. So we don't use, we know that the state uses disadvantaged for the purpose of the use of virus screen and SB 535 implementation. So if we're gonna go with terms that are underserved, marginalized, or whatever, I would suggest that we are consistent with the state so that we don't continue to navigate different words. So that would be my recommendation on that, but that's not what we refer to ourselves in the environmental justice movement. I also, for example, there's a program that we worked on where we know that our zones are red zones, but we don't say we're red zones. We're working towards green zones. So we have a program that's called green zones because that's where we want to move towards. So I would suggest doing a brainstorm of where do we want to see ourselves as communities, and that would be the term rather than continue to disinvest even in the language. That would be it. Thank you.
And I've got a follow-up question for you, Caro, is in terms of from a public agency utilizing the term environmental justice communities to identify those vulnerable communities that we're concerned about. Is that, do you feel that that's appropriate or not?
In that sense, I don't want to speak for the environmental justice movement. Do we want our public agencies referring to our communities as environmental justice communities? So the issue here is that what we're witnessing as part of the environmental justice movement is that environmental justice and equity and addressing issues for communities of color is now a hot topic. And what we're witnessing is a co-option of our work. We see it all the time. We see the language being co-opted. We see the work being co-opted. And so this is new to me. I'm processing this as I go. I think I want us to be cautious of agencies using branding, using our brand to articulate their work. And we're not this is an environmental justice movement. We're not a brand. And so I want us to be cautious on that. So maybe that could be something that I could take back. I would want us to think on that and as an environmental justice movement and say, do we want public agencies to use environmental justice to refer to our work? It's a really big question.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you for your comments. Mr. Pollard?
Okay. I'm just gonna, I personally don't see, I look at all these words as being synonymous, you guys. And so it's in my community, it's a very similar process to what do we use? Southeast San Diego or Southeastern San Diego, right? And so it literally depends upon who you talk to, and so my question really is, I was wondering who the human relations group spoke with to come up with these terms. And Cado, I agree that our language needs to be consistent with the state. I like that. Because it does ensure as the best we can that we all have that same vision, right? I mean, to me, underinvested, I like, because that's what we're going through. But you guys, it's the same thing with under-resourced. I mean, it's literally a thin line, and it all, in my opinion, it all points to communities that have been ignored, or it's not even ignored, because when you start talking about that, in some areas, it is a systematic pattern. It's not ignored, you know? So, I mean, I would hate to spend a lot of time splitting hairs, and that might be the fact that we've been down this road before a few times. Every couple years, you know, we come up and we hear something better, and a couple of people latch on to it, and then they want to interject something. So, I mean, I hate to be that old fart that says, look, let's not get drugged down in the details. I mean, I would, like I said, I'd be supportive of using the state or some other overarching sort of entity that would, that they agree with. And that way we all can use the same, because I'm telling you, I know who drove this. And I at least I have my intuition. And there's no logic to it, you guys. If it is the group of people that I think is driving this from the Human Relations Committee, it's just, I think the conversation is worth having, but let's not spend a whole heck of a lot of time doing this. And that's all I got, you guys.
Wonderful. We appreciate your comments. Anybody else? I see, I only see Caro and Mr. Pollard. They're the only ones with their hands raised. So Mr. Mohammed, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is Mohammed Tuama from El Cajon. So regarding this topic, I believe, I know that every sentence, every word or every term is different, but they look alike if I compare them, if I apply them to my community, the Middle Eastern community or newcomers community. But as Brian just said, Randy was just what this is not an important topic when we talk about what we can do right now. Like when I see the committee from the San Diego Relationship Committee, I don't think that they have an Arabic speaker with them. And if there is, it won't be an Arabic person, just like the county social group committee or something. I believe this committee, the one we have right now, have more representation of communities than the city of San Diego or the county of San Diego. So I believe whatever we decide here is more important than what they are saying. What is important that we actually have a representation from various communities. So I believe this is what we have to care about, that we already have representation from various communities, not the term that they want us to use. And I'm sorry if I was not totally clear on this. Thank you.
No, you were absolutely clear. So thank you for that. We're going to move on to Claire Grubner, followed by Erica Leary and Craig Jones. Claire, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think I see all, sides of this conversation. I think the biggest thing is in the work and the actual change that happens. But I also believe that, the words we use have a lot of power. And I think that we can, from internally, we can understand, what is meant by these words, but those from the outside, the different ways that we talk about communities that have been historically disinvested or underinvested, they have power in how other communities think about those. And so I do think that there is an important conversation here, and the words that we use should reflect that it's not the community's fault, that it is a systemic issue. And so whatever word we decide to land on, or whatever term, should reflect that justice is a key piece. I don't know the best word either. I've gone in circles around this, from my in my work, but I just wanted to throw out there that it really should reflect the historical injustices. hopefully that was clear.
It was, thank you. Erica Leary, the floor is yours.
Sorry, gosh. So thank you. I think I have a question for Jane in terms of what's happening with other planning organizations in the state and maybe the country. I don't have a answer or suggestion necessarily. I did Google, and there's this article that came out in August of 2020 by the Urban Institute that says defining communities of concern in transportation planning. It kind of talks about different phrases. It does address what I think was mentioned in terms of the environmental justice language. In some places that there's a sense that that's being hijacked. So to just use that terminology and then not follow through on actions and investments, it's just using language without actual changes. So I guess my first question is what other planning districts are using, and if we can come to any consensus of if we need to change communities of concern, or if that is still a dominant term in planning organizations, and that this group can kind of defend using that terminology, and if not, then move on to potential other language. There did not seem to be a clear answer in this article that I found online.
Right. I read the same article, and I think it had a great historical, trajectory of talking about communities, and but I think that's exactly it. That I think it's the context is important, and whether you're talking about a population versus talking about a geographic community, that's one piece of it. I think the other aspect is, I don't think that there's any consensus across that we need to have a glossary of terms, because it depends on what we're talking about at the time. Whether, for example, in terms of decision-making process in the planning process, you want to talk about disenfranchised populations, right, that have not had a voice in the decision-making. So it's associated also with what the action is, as opposed to being looking at communities in terms of the investment or lack thereof in those communities. So I don't think that there's a consensus at all. I think the MPOs have been moving away from a collective term of communities of concern, but they're still trying to, there's moments when you have to you're trying to talk about a geographic community, and you've got to have a term that distinguishes it from other communities, right? So no, I don't think that it's been that there's any kind of consensus. I think I agree with everyone who's spoken so far that it's more about what's actually happening and what those actions are. But we, obviously don't want to offend, so we need to try to figure out, how important the terminology is. So Craig, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have to evoke the ghost of Shakespeare. A rose by any other name. That's kind of where we're involved here. I want to ask again. I appreciate that Sandag is trying to be responsive to community voice, and I think I mentioned last month that the term communities of concern can be taken to be, it sounds to me to be a little bit paternalistic, which may be where this is coming from. I would support Barry's notion that we need to do what's practical, and as Sandag produces reports and et cetera, it needs to be responsive to the source in incorporating their nomenclature. So I don't know where this leaves us. if I had to vote for one, it would probably be something like underinvested or historically underinvested. So are we obligated to take an action or motion on this?
I know this is really just a brainstorming session to, get a sense of what types of terms will, evoke concern, right? Is saying vulnerable communities, is that going to have and so yeah, we're just looking for terms that would be amenable and to make sure that we don't have terms that would be offensive. I like the idea of keeping with the space, but even if you do that, if you look at any MPO's work, they're going to different terms used in different moments in time, depending on what the report is and what's being discussed, and the context of the conversation, right? So yeah, there's going to be one single.
Jane, this is Vivian. I'd like to ask Mr. Mohammed to please mute yourself and anybody else.
Yeah.
We're getting some feedback, so I don't know if Mr. Mohammed could hear us, but if staff can mute all the panelists, I'd appreciate that. Sorry about that, Jane. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I was trying to mute too, but I can't see his name on here. I don't know what's my
It's fine now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, super. So you're back. Do you let's see. So
I'm back. Yeah. So okay. I think we have Monica next, and then I'm going to call on the people who haven't spoken first, which I see Ms. Canan Martinez. So, but first, Monica Hernandez, take the floor.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say that I really do appreciate having this space and these conversations. Like Caro was saying, this is also really new terrain for us in thinking through these things, and we do see the importance in all of this. For us, a lot of these terms are very contextual, kind of like what speaking to what Jane was saying, because there are certain nuances to each of these terms. I think us personally, we tend to lean towards historically or institutionally underfunded or underinvested, because that really, I feel, gets to the grain of what some of our issues in our community are facing, this lack of funding. But I think at the end, it's all in the work, and that's just all I gotta say. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Martinez?
Yes, I'm fairly new to this group, so I would maybe need some more context behind the letter that was sent from this Human Relations Commission on what exactly and where they've seen this language used in written documents, or is it from other sources? Because I noticed at the last board meeting or 2 board meetings ago, when they were just the board was discussing the equity proposal that was on the table, that there was a lot of paternalistic language used by some of the board members as far as my trailer park residents and my military members, and sort of blanketing people into different groups, apart from those that historically have been communities of concern, and sort of making these blanket statements about groups throughout, which I saw as pretty problematic in the board meeting. And so encouraging, I think, the mayors of the cities to quit speaking this way is a good idea. But how can we make sure that we continue that conversation while addressing the language and any kind of written documents by SANDAG at the same time?
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Ms. Martinez had a question, Jane. Where did this letter come from? Maybe if you could, I thought you touched on it in the beginning of the presentation, but if you could just refresh us who the group is, and go ahead.
Right, this came from the chair of the Human Relations Commission of the City of San Diego, and it was sent to the chair of Sandag and Hassan Akrada, the executive director, and asking Sandag to not utilize the term communities of concern. And we circulated the letter itself to the working group. But the feeling that the term connotes being paternalistic and invoking negative, what's the word I want? I'm trying to think of it right now, but it just escapes me. But deficit thinking, sort of deficit thinking. But I just wanted to say that the origin of it actually came from an EJ, a social equity stakeholders working group, when we were actually trying to come up with a broader term for communities that we were concerned about. So but that was a while ago. So yeah,
All
so
right.
that's where it came from.
So
Councilmember
you guys,
Moreno, this is Colleen Clemenson from Sandag, and I wondered if you'd mind if I chime in here.
Absolutely.
On this, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely.
So I guess there's just a few things I'd like to clarify from a staff perspective. We were not expecting this letter. And there are a number of groups and commissions that report to the mayor's office. The Human Relations Commission is one of them. And at least from your staff's perspective here, we feel very strongly about the importance of this group and your voice being heard. And unless there was something that we were told that was absolutely illegal, we feel strongly that we have you, and we are so grateful to have this group, that we will stand behind what it is that you come up with. We know there was an engaged process that initially came up with the communities of concern term. And I think that maybe have been 2 working groups ago previous. And there was a lot of time spent coming up with that. Should this group agree that that is how you want to proceed using that term, we are absolutely behind you. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows this isn't something that inclusivity is a big part of this, right? And we don't need to be dictating this. We're just looking for something that folks feel makes sense in the context of what we are talking about. And I'm just going to throw it out there, and not to put you on the spot at all, Councilmember Moreno, but I know you're very familiar with all of these, somewhat familiar with the Human Relations Committee and others at the City of San Diego, and just wondered if you had a different opinion than, what Jane and I are sort of presenting here that would give us any context.
To me, just to have the setting, Carolina, you're up next in the panelist. If you guys want to raise your hand, if you guys want to speak, please raise your hand or turn on the camera. So for me, as the chair of this board, a group sent Sandag a letter questioning our usage of a certain word. We are the social equity group. We can take this up at a later meeting with a vote if we would like to change that. We can send a letter to the board if we'd like that, or we could just receive the letter and say, thank you, and move right along. So it's really up to this body what you would like to do. I will say that I don't think that I could tell an elected official, a mayor, a city council to not use certain words. That is not my position, but we can, however, request for Sandag to use a certain word for when we're referring to a certain community, right? Once again, it's completely up to this board or it's up to this body. So that would be my position. I really don't have one. It's up to you guys. I am a vehicle, and I'm here to conduct this meeting and allow you guys to speak. So with that, Caro, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think this is a really valuable conversation, and it speaks to where we're at historically, if we want to use that term. I could commit to consulting with my team and just fleshing out some ideas. I value the comment from Monica around historically underfunded. I'm thinking of as we're transitioning and people are becoming more accepting of the fact that we're still dealing with the consequences of segregation and redlining and racism directly, right? And so how do we use a term that someone that is not welcoming this, it opens the door for them, especially folks that are in working in agencies like SANDAG, public agencies, so that it bridges the conversation and turns into action so that we could see more funding in our communities, right? But I could commit to consulting with my team. I would also want to consult with other organizations, environmental justice organizations throughout the state, see what's going on and what we're hearing. And I'm happy to bring that back.
Wonderful, Caro. So this is, I don't see anybody else with their hands up, and we do have a hard stop at 12 o'clock. This has been a wonderful discussion, and I'm going to move on. I don't see anybody in the public with their hands raised either, so we're going to move on to our next item, which is possible topics for next meeting. If you have any suggestions, please email me or Jane with possible suggestions. I don't see anybody in the public with their hands raised for item 7. So we are going to move on to item 8. And the next working group meeting is for Thursday, April 1st. It's not a joke, 2021 at 10:30 a.m. I also want to encourage everybody to monitor the board agenda in the coming weeks, as there are going to be various aspects of the 2021 regional plan that will be coming to the board for discussion. We, of course, will alert you as well. But does anybody have any questions or comments regarding our next meeting?
Sorry, Chair, I just wanted to say that it is possible that the April 1st meeting may be changed to later in April because you have a conflict on that day. So it's possible that it may be the following Thursday, but we'll send out an email.
We'll let you guys know. Mr. Jones? I see your
Just to be
hand raised.
clear, yeah, thank you. There had been some earlier discussion about having a second working group meeting here in March, but I gather we're not going to have one, or will we?
We will not be having a second meeting in March. And Mr. Pollard, I did not forget about you. So before this meeting ends, it's my understanding that from Robert's Rules of Order that we can hear, the problem is that Mr. Pollard was not called on to vote on item number 5. Item number 5. So I would like to propose that we open up the vote again. If nobody has an issue with that, if the clerk can go down, can call that motion, a vote for that motion, please. Item number 5, proposed fare changes. So we're going to take the vote right up, Mr. Pollard.
Okay, I was just okay with just voting on the chat and having that included in the minutes.
I have to follow Robert's Rules of Order because we are a government, not quasi-government entity. So I'm going to ask the clerk to take the vote again.
Okay.
I can do this.
Okay.
And Barry, the other issue is that in the virtual world, voting has to be by voice.
Okay.
Craig Jones, Alliance for Regional Solutions.
Aye, yes.
Rose Ceballos, Bayside Community Center.
Aye.
Monica Hernandez, Casa Familiar.
Aye.
Randy Torres, Van Vleck, City Heights CC.
Aye.
Asuncena Lopez, Chula Vista Community Collaborative. Asuncena. Brenda Lee, are you there? Brenda Lee? Okay, so we don't have Chula Vista. Carol Lewis, the El Cajon Collaborative?
Yes.
Conani Martinez, National Latino Research Center?
Yes.
I know that Elizabeth Liu is having technical difficulties. Elizabeth, are you there?
Finally, yes.
Okay, super.
Thank you.
Okay, is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Claire Grubner, Olivewood Gardens?
Yes.
And Lorna de los Santos, Samahan Health? Lorna, are you there?
I'm here.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. And Barry Pollard, Urban Collaborative?
Yes.
And Erica Leary, Vista Community Clinic? Erica?
Yes.
All right. And Caro, Environmental Health Coalition?
Yes.
Okay. There we go. That's unanimous.
Wonderful. So the motion passes. Thank you for that. I
And-
apologize for that, Mr. Pollard. And
Oh, no
you would
worries.
like to speak on the on item number 8, upcoming meeting?
Yeah, for the next meeting, let's maybe have an action plan or an action item to vote on what terms, because that's sort of still left sort of open a little bit. Let's close it up. I love the idea of going back and let's talk to our people and see what they think. I mean, that's why we're here, right? So that'll give us some time to maybe gather some input, and then we can probably close this up at the next meeting, if that's okay.
Why don't we do this, Mr. Pollard? Why don't we add it as a discussion item?
Okay.
And at that meeting, you could make a motion for, if the body would like, for a future vote. But I think a lot of us have said that we want to digest, or I've heard a lot that we need to digest, circle back. So in essence, giving you a month to circle back, meet, discuss, then action item to vote on the next meeting. How does that sound?
Perfect.
Reasonable? Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. And I just want to reiterate, if you would like items added, possible topics for the next meeting, we heard we're going to have a discussion item again on this social equity nomenclature. And if you have any other ones, please feel free to email me or Jane. My email is my name, Vivian Moreno @sandiego.gov. And with that, thank you for making the time today. We are officially adjourned, and I appreciate everybody and everybody raising their hand and turning on the camera and speaking. So have a wonderful month, everybody, and I'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good.
Thank
meeting.
you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Janelle. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, staff. Thanks, committee members.